What's up, everybody? This is Harry Bernard Taylor, HBT, from the Straight Up Wrestling Show. And I'm here to do a show about my favorite wrestler. Many pundits in wrestling, many wrestling fans over the years have proclaimed this man to be the number one wrestler in the world and probably right now the most famous wrestler or the most talked about ex-wrestler in the business today. And I'm talking about Nature Boy Ric Flair. You can see him behind me. I'm going to go ahead and talk about him. This right here is a series that I'm doing on the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And I'm talking about the man that helped build the Nature Boy Ric Flair. I just did a few weeks ago, I did the feuds. So I'm going to get back on that. Looks like I erased something, but this right here is episode 2. I did episode 1, but it's called The Man That Helped Build the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And like I said, last video was the feuds. I actually recorded this without recording it live. So when I did it, I was recording it and then I tried to upload it. I was able to upload it to YouTube without a hitch. So I got good quality there, but I had to upload it from my TV. I had to record it off my TV onto our Facebook page live. So we didn't get the quality that I wanted there, but the video is there if you go back to check it out. And I talked about the feuds, and I talked about 16 feuds that Ric Flair had, and I talked about the mentions of feuds that he had over the years. The thing about Ric Flair, he had so many great feuds. That Jim Crockett Jr. was able to set up for him when he was wrestling for Jim Crockett Promotions and working for the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling area when he was working for WCW, and then he went up to WWE, WWF, and made a name for himself up there too. But his legacy that he already had built up in Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and the NWA all those years, it pretty much elevated him to the status that he was gonna be at, no matter if he would have went up to to the WWF or not. He was already world famous. He was already worldwide known. But that going up to the WWF, even though he was he's past his prime, it elevated his career. It elevated him up even more. It elevated him up to where pretty much everybody in wrestling knew who he was and everybody saw him. So, but basically, right now, man, we are on part 2 of this series, and right now, I'm gonna talk about the man that formed around him, the man that formed around the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And like I said, the series is called "The Man That Helped Build the Nature Boy Ric Flair." I think I'm gonna have like 2 more parts of it, but right here, I'm talking about the man that formed around the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And I started watching Ric Flair right after his plane crash. I did see him before the plane crash when he was teaming with Rip Hawk, and then I saw him after the plane crash, and this was around 1974, 1975 when he went on that solo run, and it's history from there. And this is right after the plane crash. He had slimmed down because when I first saw him, he was teaming up with Rip Hawk. He was a bigger guy, bigger blonde guy, and had a little bit more muscle, but it's pretty much a brawny type, brawn type guy. Really had some still had some fat on him, a little bit around that 290, 300 pound mark. And he, at that time, when he was at that weight, he was hanging out with Ken Patera and up in Minnesota, and then he had came down here, but he was a power lifter. So when he slimmed down, he still had that physique. He still had a muscular tone to him. But the thing about Ric Flair had a lot. He went on that solo run, and his first major feud that he had in Jim Crockett Promotions was with Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel. Then he had a feud right after that with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. But in the midst of these feuds that he was having, he had men that formed around him that made him look stronger than ever, made him look like he was the man. I mean, it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild, and it was eye opening to see this young guy in this promotion. He wasn't like the older type guys that was over in the promotion, like Johnny Valentine, Rip Hawk, Johnny Weaver, Paul Jones. Chief Wahoo McDaniel. These guys look like they can knock your head off. You look at these guys, man. They was tough, old, rugged, veteran guys. It looked like they just knock your head completely off. But Ric Flair, he was this young guy, pretty boy, and who could wrestle, who could actually get in there and wrestle, he could talk, very flamboyant. I wouldn't have thought at that time, when I was like 7, 8 years old, that this man would take over the game that like he did. But like I said, I saw stars when I was at the Greenville Auditorium. I saw stars when I first got a liking to him, and he was so hated. He was the most hated wrestler in the world at that time, even in that smaller regional promotion. So, but the man that formed around him, number one, Rip Hawk. Rip Hawk, like he was his tag team partner in 1974, and Rip Hawk was the one who carried that tag team. But Ric Flair, he got in there, and you could see the talent that he had. But Rip Hawk carried that tag team, but he made the young man look very good. Rip Hawk, who was a veteran who had been wrestling, I mean, I guess since the 50s or whatever. I mean, he was in his 40s at that time, early 40s, I believe. And Rip Hawk, I'm pretty sure he was in his early 40s. Tough guy, smoking a cigar and all that, just a tough man, and could really fight. I loved Rip Hawk, but he elevated Ric Flair and made Ric Flair look like he was something special, man. Like, hey, you're already a star, even though he wasn't a star at that time. But Rip Hawk, number one, first guy that I'm gonna put out there that surrounded Nature Boy Ric Flair. Number two, now this man right here really put Ric Flair Ric Flair, man, on a path to success. In my eyes, probably the most important, and that's Blackjack Mulligan. And I'm talking about even more important than the Four Horsemen. Because when the Four Horsemen came, Ric Flair is a lot of people might not want to hear this, but it's true. Ric Flair already had established himself. He had established himself, already had won 2 world heavyweight championships at that time when the Four Horsemen came along. He had beat Dusty Rhodes once for it, and he had beat Harley Race for it one time. So, and back then, it was very hard to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship or the WWE World Championship, which was called the WWF World Heavyweight Championship at the time. And before that, it was called the WWE World Heavyweight Championship and AEW World Heavyweight Championship. It was very hard winning world championships at the time. Harley Race was no joke. It was hard to beat Harley Race. Dusty Rhodes tried for years, finally beat him, and held that title for 3 months, and Ric Flair won the title. I thought Rhodes would hold it for a couple years or whatever, like somebody like Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe, because once somebody won that World Heavyweight Championship, it was hard to take it off of him. But Ric Flair was primed, and he was destined to win that heavyweight championship, and he won the heavyweight championship. So Ric Flair, man, was just something special. But Blackjack Mulligan, he raised the stakes of Ric Flair. He put a lot of eyes on Ric Flair. You're talking about a tough cowboy, tough Texan that nobody wanted to mess with. That's Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham's dad. I mean, this guy, man, incredible specimen, incredible wrestler, Blackjack Mulligan. Number 3, Greg the Hammer Valentine, the son of Johnny Valentine. And at the time, I wasn't sure when he first started hanging out with Ric Flair if he was the brother of Johnny Valentine. He was Johnny Valentine's son. There was a lot of different stories out there, but he came in, and in my eyes, I thought he was a better wrestler than Johnny Valentine, but a lot of people looked at it different. Johnny was a little bit older when I first saw him, and just like Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel, the old Indian, and Johnny Valentine was old, but you're talking about 2 guys that beat the slop out of each other. And I mean, that's all I really saw with Johnny Valentine, a whole bunch of punching, kicking, elbow smashes, and things like that. I mean, you talking about a tough guy, and him and Wahoo Mcdaniel. If you want to look at any modern wrestling matches today that you can say it mirrors what Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel and Johnny Valentine did, you got to look at the Walter Sheamus match and the Walter Ilga Bragimov match. That's the type of violence that you saw between Chief Wahoo Mcdaniel and Johnny Valentine. And to tell you the truth, it was even more harsh than what we saw with Walter and Sheamus. Definitely is. And man, it's hard to find those things. I really can't find it on YouTube. But man, if you can find anybody who has any footage of those battles, definitely check it out. Or if you know anybody who is a follower of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, Ask them about those feuds, or ask anybody in the Carolinas, Virginia, about that feud between Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Johnny Valentine, and they will tell you straight up the most hard-hitting feud ever in wrestling. I have to put it number one, man. Those guys would basically kill each other. And you talking about having a packed house every night when they, whatever town they went to, they had it because those guys put their bodies on the line, man, like I never seen before. So, but Greg Valentine, to me, was a better wrestler than his father. And I just think it's because he was more of a smooth wrestler than his father. But one thing about Greg the Hammer Valentine, he had that same emotion. He had that same charge that his father had. I mean, he would just beat you down. He was talking about a tough guy. Greg the Hammer Valentine will beat you down, and he's still doing it today. And one thing that was different about Greg the Hammer Valentine, you see a lot of guys come up in sports, a lot of second or third generation guys. They don't have the same mentality. They don't have the same toughness that their predecessor, that their father or grandfather had. But this guy definitely has it. Greg the Hammer Valentine, he was the second coming of Johnny Valentine, and I think he was a better wrestler, but I'm not going to say he was tougher. Nobody. I don't, it's not many people I can say was tougher than Johnny Valentine. Hard hitting. I mean, this guy, man, and he took a lot of fire from Chief Wahoo McDaniel. And Chief Wahoo McDaniel, anybody knows Chief Wahoo McDaniel or saw Chief Wahoo McDaniel knows that Indian would, man, I don't know if I should call him Indian, but that's what we called him back then. But that Indian, that Native American would knock your dog. He would knock the sweat off you, knock your teeth out, bust your nose with a chop, whatever it took. Chief Wahoo McDaniel would do it to you to take you out. So, man, the next man that hung around him was Ken Patera. Ken Patera, strong muscle man, and like I said, Ken Patera, Ric Flair used to hang out with Ken Patera, who used to own the deadlift record in the United States. Deadlift record in the world. He deadlifted more weight than anybody in the Olympics back then in 1972, won a gold medal. But Ric Flair used to hang out with Ken Patera at that time, and Ken Patera, like I said, one of these guys that made him look like he was just this spectacular guy that couldn't be beat. And I mean, like I said, he was a young man, but the people, what I'm talking about, I know I'm going by these guys one by one, but when I'm talking about these guys used to surround him, I'm talking about Blackjack Mulligan, Greg the Hammer Valentine, and Ken Patera, along with a couple other wrestlers like Bobby Duncan and Ernie Ladd. They would all come out at the same time and surround Ric Flair and have while Ric Flair was having a promo. Or they would have a promo and they would let Ric Flair come in there and take over the promo. It was something special to see. It was like, he had a clique before cliques was even popular. Outside of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, you really didn't have a lot of cliques. You had a few, and then you had your managers and they had their armies or whatever. But Ric Flair had a clique. He had people, he had men behind him all the time that made him look like he was, okay, this right here. At that time, he was a rising star, but these guys were big time stars themselves. They was big time stars, but it took a back seat to this young challenger, man, as he was coming up. It was great to see, and it was amazing to see, to tell you the truth. It really was. Next man, I just mentioned him, the big cat, Ernie Ladd. In my opinion, probably the number one black wrestler ever to put on some tights. One of the best football players, one of the best defensive ends, defensive tackles. He played both positions ever in football and played mostly in the AFL. Played for San Diego Chargers. Had a lot of battles on the football field with Chief Wahoo McDaniel. But Ernie the Cat Ladd, man, something special to see in the ring until, like say, later on in his career, he had knee problems. But even then, he still was something special to see in the ring. And if you look at him, had that presence about him, had that intimidation factor like Brock Lesnar. So he was pretty much Brock Lesnar before Brock Lesnar, but a bigger Brock Lesnar as far as height wise. I mean, 6'9", 325 pounds, and man, we put the boot to you and had the best leg drop of all times. Sorry, Hulk Hogan, but Ernie Ladd's leg drop looked like it could kill you, man. But Ernie Ladd, man, he would surround the Nature Boy, and he was, he put Ric Flair up there. Like say, another big man, just like Blackjack Mulligan, who's all of 6'7", 6'8", 315 pounds, 320 pounds, did the same thing. But these guys, these are two big men that put the Nature Boy Ric Flair over. These guys didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that, but they must have saw something in the young man, and they actually came out there and did it. You had another guy a monster, who's a football player, legendary football player over in Canada in the Canadian Football League. Angelo Moscow came over, man, one of the toughest wrestlers I ever seen in my life. Mean, nasty. Talking about big, mean, and nasty. Angelo Moscow, this guy was it. Angelo Moscow, man, another guy surrounded himself, so came and became one of Ric Flair's close friends. Who come out there with Ric Flair while he was having interviews, and pretty much was putting Ric Flair over, like, hey, you the man, you the man. So it was just flat out crazy to see this, but you saw this week in, week out. Ric Flair, like I say, he would wrestle on TV, not wrestle on TV, wrestle a little more frequent than what you see somebody like MJF today, what MJF is doing. And I saw one of my favorite podcasters, Majestic Marie Tina, on today. We're talking about MJF. I said, I wish that that AEW Tony Khan would have convince him to wrestle a little bit more. But I think a lot of people think he shouldn't be wrestling. But the thing about Ric Flair, when he wasn't, he was on TV and he would talk and he have all these people around him, and people used to walk by, and my family used to walk by. My dad, his friends would come around. My mom's friends would come around, and he saw us kids, we sitting there, we watching wrestling, especially me. I'm out there watching it by myself, whatever. And they would come by and say, I hate that guy. I hate that guy. I want to see that guy get beat up or whatever. Or they was interested in that guy. Who is that guy? Who do you think he is? Who is that guy got all these people around him? He come out, Ric Flair, the blonde hair, those shades, whatever, had the loudest woo. That woo was loud back then. That's before all that drinking and all that got to his lungs. They were like, who is this guy? MJF has that same effect on people. Same effect that Ric Flair had on people. So he needs to get in there and show people what he can do. So the people that come in that don't usually watch wrestling, I think MJF can grab that crowd. So that's what I'm pretty much was trying to get over, but I really didn't go into that with Majestic Marie, but I'll probably talk to her about that a little bit later. But that's what I see with MJF is something that I saw in Ric Flair. But man, let's move on. Bobby Duncan, a big cowboy. Bobby was probably wasn't as big as Blackjack Mulligan, wasn't big as Ernie Ladd, but Bobby Duncan was all of 6'6", 6'7", big dude who used to come out there, like I said, hang out with Angelo Moscow, Ken Patera, Ernie Ladd, and they would all be in a group. They would all surround Ric Flair like he was the king, and they was bound to him. It was amazing. Like I said, it was amazing to see. But Bobby Duncan was another one who did that. His cousins, the Anderson brothers, Ole and Gene Anderson, the world tag team champions, two of the most famous wrestlers in the world at that time, will come out there and do the same thing with Ric Flair. And they was noted, and they was kayfabe as his cousins, the Anderson brothers. So they definitely had a lot of influence on Ric Flair's career and where he went. Then you had another big man, big 6'9", 6'10". Well, he's 6'10". He was a little bit taller, I think, than Ernie Ladd and Blackjack Mulligan. John Studd. This is another man who didn't have to do it, who was building his own legacy. And I mean, he had a legacy before he went up to the big time up in New York. He built it down south, man. And this guy was incredible. But Big John Studd, another guy who surrounded himself, who pretty much befriended the Nature Boy and was out there and helped build the Nature Boy. And it was just amazing to see all these wrestlers doing this. And I mean, it was crazy. It was man. I just don't see. I see MJF surrounding himself with a lot of people. I see a few other wrestlers doing it too. But MJF, I think if he continues to wrestle, and if he's able to get the number one guys over there in AEW, I'm talking about the name recognition guys. I'm talking about somebody like Jon Moxley becomes a heel. Bryan Danielson, who become a heel. These guys start hanging out with MJF and just pushing him over. And MJF winning that TV belt, or that with that TNT title, or win some other title that's doesn't have to be the world title. He don't have to have that right now, but have a title and pretty much out there just dominating like Ric Flair. Because Ric Flair, as he had these guys surrounding him, Ric Flair was like the Mid-Atlantic heavyweight champion, and he was the United States heavyweight champion on multiple occasions when this was happening. He didn't have the World Heavyweight Championship. He didn't have it. But they played the way it was played out that he was the World Heavyweight Champion. He was the most important champion in the industry at that time. That's the way it seemed. And even though Harley Race was the world champion, I mean, Jack Briscoe was the world champion. I mean, Dory Funk Jr., but back in the 70s, I could go all the way back to Dory Funk Jr. He was the first world champion I saw. Then you had Jack Briscoe, who was the world heavyweight champion for a couple years after Dory held it for a few years or whatever. You had Jack Briscoe holding it for a couple years. You had Harley Race held it for a year or two, year and a half. Terry Funk took it from him. Then Harley Race held it for another few years. Then, like I said, then Dusty Rhodes had it, and then Harley Race won it again. And then Dusty Rhodes won it, I think. No, not something like that. Ric Flair won it back. But it, was switched, but everybody held it for a number of years. But in the 70s, outside of Andre the Giant and Dusty Rhodes, man, Ric Flair, outside of Andre the Giant, Dusty Rhodes, and probably superstar Billy Graham and Bruno Sammartino and Ric Flair, those are the five top wrestlers back in the 70s. The five most famous wrestlers. And according to somebody like, Jim Cornette and other people say it was Andre the Giant, Dusty Rhodes, and Ric Flair. Those were the most famous wrestlers in the world. And I can say in the world because Bruno Sammartino, he didn't travel the world. He didn't travel the United States exclusively like Ric Flair. Traveled everywhere. Except for Ric Flair wasn't that big up north in the Northeast states that Bruno had, because he had a few states up there that pretty much exclusive that he had. But Ric Flair, man, will wrestle everywhere. He will wrestle Andre the Giant on numerous occasions back in the 70s. And he wrestled Dusty Rhodes, not as much, but Dusty Rhodes and him was all over the place. And Ric Flair, man, he would go, he would travel all over the United States, and he was traveling overseas at that time, and he wasn't defending the title, but he had a demand to go over to Japan, and he would go over to Australia and things like that before he won that world title. So he was already, when he won that world title, he was already a world traveler, and he went over to Mexico, he went to Puerto Rico, he went to Japan, he went to all these different places to defend that title. So he already had a big name when he got to those places. So he was groomed. To be this world heavyweight champion. And like I said, right there, man, I just gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I gave you 10, 11. I gave you 10 guys, man, that pretty much surrounded him before I gave you Baby Doll and, of course, the Four Horsemen surrounding him. We all know Baby Doll and Four Horsemen and the different type of factions that they had. You had your first faction with Ole Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, and, of course, the Nature Boy Ric Flair with J.J. Dillon. Then you had the second one with Lex Luger, Tully, Arn, and Ric Flair. And then you had the third one, which I say is the best, Barry Windham, Ric Flair, Arn, and Tully, and, of course, J.J. Dillon. But, man, they had some great people surround him, and he had some beautiful women surround him, Dark Journey, Missy Hyde, Baby Doll. So it was a lot of different people, man, woman, a lot of different people that surrounded him that made him look like he was just the greatest thing to ever walk in a pair of wrestling boots. And let me go ahead and give a shout out to some honorable mentions that helped build a Nature Boy Ric Flair, the man that formed around him. These are the men that formed around him. And so let me go ahead and give some honorable mentions, because these guys will actually pop their faces up in that group. And let's go ahead and start off with Baron von Rasky. Tough German wrestler, and had that claw. He would always come in there, man. He was a big supporter of the Nature Boy. So let me go ahead and go with Baron von Rasky. And like I already done mentioned, Angelo Moscow, but I'm not going to talk about those only ones really I'm going to talk about in this group. And let me go and talk about then the Nature Boy. Right after he did all this stuff in the NWA, WCW, had all these people surrounding him, he went to the WWF. WWF, that's what it was called back then. So we go ahead and switch it, went into the WWE, and continued where he left off. He immediately surrounded himself with the big names in that organization. Bobby Heenan, Razor Ramon, Kurt Heenan, The Undertaker. Then he, along with Triple H, started Evolution with Batista and Randy Orton. But the biggest shout outs has to go to Wahoo Mcdaniel, Vince McMahon, and definitely Jim Crockett Jr., David Crockett, and George Scott. And I'm going to go ahead and throw Rick Steamboat in there because of the incredible feud that he had with Rick Steamboat. And Rick Steamboat, when Flair, anytime that Ric Flair, because Ric Flair did switch and become fan favorite sometimes, and because David Crockett got attacked and a couple other things. But Ric Flair became fan favorite sometimes, and Ricky Steamboat always would join up with him or befriend him or whatever. But Ricky Steamboat definitely deserves credit there too. But yes, definitely, man, the biggest shout outs goes to Wahoo McDaniel, Vince McMahon, David Crockett, George Scott. But number one, I have to say Jim Crockett Jr., man. He did some incredible stuff for the Nature Boy. But man, let me go ahead and give a shout out to our sponsor. Our sponsor, this show right here is been brought to you by Happy Trails Auto Sales, your neighborhood car lot since 2007. John Greer, owner, 10 West Lee Road, Taylor, South Carolina, 29687. 864-283-0314. You want a quality car, you want a dependable car, go out and see my man John Greer, and I'm sure he'll hook you up with a dependable car. You know, I was going to put that over there in the corner, but the card is kind of dark. But John Greer, man, owner of Happy Trails Auto Sales. Like I say, it's on 10 Wesley Road, Taylor, South Carolina, 29687. The phone number is 864-283-0314. You can check it out on Happy Trails 1986 at yahoo.com. Happy Trails 1986 at yahoo.com if you want to send him an email, or you can check out happytrailsauto.com. happytrailsauto.com. And Chris and I, like I say, we will be going over there, shoot a commercial, but you definitely can check it out at happytrailsauto.com, man. And he can get you a car to wherever you at in the country. And believe me, I endorse his cars. He has some great cars over there on his car lot. It's a used car lot. And John will give you a reasonable deal. And I'm pretty sure, man, he probably might probably cut you a deal if you come over and say Straight Up Wrestling Show sent you. Say Harry sent you over that way, or Chris sent you over that way. But man, yeah, it's been a great evening talking about my man Ric Flair. But go back and check out the man that helped build the Nature Boy, the Fuse. And right now, I'm just gonna run down the Fuse real quick. The Fuse, number one, Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Number two, Ricky Steamboat. Number three, the Anderson Brothers. Number four, Greg the Hammer Valentine. Number five, Roddy Piper. Number six, Dusty Rhodes. Number seven, Harley Race. Number eight, David Carey and Kevin Von Erich. And this is one that I didn't mention. In the last one, I had to mention him on an honorable mention, was Barry Windham. Next was Nikita Koloff. Next was Tully Blanchard. Then he had Magnum TA. Then he had Ronnie Garvin. Then he had Lex Luger, Ricky Morton, and Sting. And I'm not even going to mention honorable mentions here, but that list of names, you can't find that. Nobody in the history of wrestling, in my opinion, well, at least the almost 50 years, 40 plus years, 45 plus years that I've been watching wrestling, I've never seen somebody have a set of few that had a set like that they had to go through. So that's what made Ric Flair so special. And like I said, in between those feuds, man, he had some incredible feuds that he had to go through, that he had to battle through, that just made him what he was. That just made him this incredible wrestler. And like my man Rocky Balboa, well, not Rocky Balboa, but the guy, what is that guy's name on? I think it was on Rocky 4. Rocky 4, it might be Rocky 5, but the guy was talking when Tommy was asking, why is all these fans out here cheering for Ric Flair? When the guy who not Ric Flair, but Rocky Balboa trained Tommy Gunn. Tommy Gunn said, why all these people? I'm out here winning and stuff like that. They all cheering for Rocky Balboa. And the guy, man, that was the promoter, he told him, he said, what you want me to do? He said the man fought wars in the ring. Same thing with Ric Flair. He fought wars in that ring. He did. He fought wars in the ring. I mean, he bled, he paid the price. And so, man, that's why people consider him the greatest wrestler of all time. That's why ESPN did that 30 for 30 on him. He's the only wrestler that they've done something like that on. I mean, incredible career. And look forward to coming to you guys with a part 3. I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do with that, but like I said, episode 1 was the man that helped build the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, the Fuse, and part 2 is the man that formed around him. But until then, I'm HBT signing off for the Straight Up Wrestling Show.